Father, the Bible teaches us that you are a God who hears our prayers. That you are a God who is concerned about our lives and what we do with our lives. You sent Jesus to be our Lord and Savior, to help us to understand the things of God. And so this morning, Lord, we pray this prayer in the name of Jesus. And Father, we pray for these folks that we've mentioned, Donna, Nedra, Phyllis, and Vera, Mary, Donald, Marge, Brother Harold, Carol, Becky, Sharon, and probably, Lord, there's some that we've forgotten. I want to remember Maynard, Nelson's husband. I want to remember my friend Gary Colombo and Jimmy Stewart, two men who have meant a lot to me in the past that I've worked together with, who are both sick. I want to pray for Brother Dean too, who's on vacation, that you'll bring him back safely, because we miss him. And for others that aren't here today, Lord, for various reasons, we pray for each one of them. We pray for this service, Lord, that you will speak to our hearts and help us to understand clearly the things of God. In Jesus' name we pray, and everyone said,
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Praise the Lord. Well, as you know, last week we started to study in the book of Daniel, which is a tie-in book to the book of Revelation, actually, because it's a book of, especially the second half of Daniel particularly, but all of Daniel is a part of prophecy. It tells us a great many things about the future. Some have already happened. And we started last week, and remember I told you how Daniel came to be in the nation of Babylon, that the armies of Nebuchadnezzar came along and destroyed Judah, Jerusalem, the temple, everything, and took people that were there off as prisoners, and they became exiles in the country of Babylon. And Daniel and his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were four young men who were very unique young men, who were four of the exiles that found that found the king's eye. In other words, he saw some usefulness in them and began to train them and teach them and have them learn some things to be sort of advisors to him, so that he would understand how the Hebrews did things and where they came from and things that he would need to know. And of course, as we follow the book of Daniel, we'll see that that develops into much more. But so far, he's still a young man, and so we find ourselves in chapter 2, and we're only going to do half of this. I'm going to call it part 1 and part 2, because it's a very long chapter. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, and we're going to talk about this dream that he has, and then we're going to see, before we even get into what the dream was about and the interpretation, I want us to talk today about Daniel's response to that dream in the beginning, because I think it's something that we need to learn from. Anyway, we're going to start in chapter 2, verse 1. Now, in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar had only been king for 2 years. In the first 2 years he was king, he already conquered Judah and all the surrounding territory. And Nebuchadnezzar had dreams, and his spirit was troubled, and his sleep left him. And then the king gave orders to call in the magicians, the conjurers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. So they came in and stood before the king. Back in those days, and I'm not so sure that it's changed all that much, when you have a dream and the interpretation of a dream, sometimes is a very important thing in a person's life, especially in counseling. But back in this day, apparently this king had an amazing dream that he didn't understand, and he could hardly remember it or even vocalize it. But he says in verse 3, and the king said to them, I had a dream. My spirit is anxious to understand the dream. So he brought all of his advisors, and he said, listen, I had this dream. I need for you to interpret it for me because, man, it's a scary dream and I don't quite understand what's going on. And so then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic. Now, by the way, I think I mentioned to you, because this book was written by Daniel. It was a sort of a journal of his life in Babylon. And I think I told you last week that there are 4 languages in this book. And like right now, this portion of it's in Aramaic. And it says, "O king, live forever. Tell the dream to your servants, and we will declare the interpretation." Now you see, that kind of it becomes a little bit of a problem. Tell me your dream, and then I will interpret it for you. Well, I can interpret that dream however I want to. Yeah, you know, king, you're having a dream there that the Lord's trying to tell you, give me $1 million. You know, I mean, they could say anything they wanted to. And the king was smarter than that. And so the king answered in verse 5 and said to the Chaldeans, "The command from me is firm. If you do not make known to me the dream and its interpretation, you will be torn limb from limb, and your houses made into a rubbish heap." In other words, listen, I'm wise to you guys. I know that you can tell me any interpretation you want to. So if you're all that smart and everything, you need to probably be able to tell me what my dream was, and then interpret it for me, because I'll be impressed then. And so he said, and then of course he tells them in verse 5 also, what's going to happen if they don't. Now they're really on the line now. I mean, trouble is a brewing. In verse 6 it says, "But if you declare the dream and its interpretation, you will receive from me gifts and a reward of great honor, and therefore declare to me the dream and its interpretation." And they answered a second time and said, "Let the king tell the dream to his servants, and we will declare the interpretation." The king answered and said, "I know for certain that you are bargaining for time, inasmuch as you have seen that the command from me is firm, that if you do not make the dream known to me, there is only one decree for you have agreed together to speak lying and corrupt words before me until the situation is changed. Therefore, tell me the dream, that I may know that you can declare to me the interpretation." Nebuchadnezzar was a pretty smart guy. Amen. I mean, he didn't get to be king and successful without being a pretty smart guy. And I think he was a smart guy. Verse 10 says, "The Chaldeans answered the king and said, there is not a man on earth who could declare the matter for the king, inasmuch as no great king or ruler has ever asked anything like this of any magician, conjurer, or Chaldean." Now there is a situation in the book of Genesis, and it has to do with Joseph, the son of Jacob. Joseph was sold by his brothers, as you recall, as a slave into Egypt. And God was with him. God's hand was on him. And somehow he managed, and the book tells all about it, the Bible tells all about it, somehow he managed to go from being a slave to being the prime minister of Egypt. Now that's quite a step. And he got there by God's hand, but he interpreted a dream for the Pharaoh. Now, in that particular case, the Pharaoh told him the dream, and Joseph interpreted it. This time, Nebuchadnezzar has had a dream, but he's not telling them what the dream was, because he doesn't trust them. And so it goes over in verse 12. "Because of this, the king became indignant and very furious, and gave orders to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain, and they looked for Daniel and his friends to kill them." Okay, now we have a story. Because we're reading the book of Daniel, we're learning about Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And you recall, last week in this, they were made in the group of the Chaldeans to be some of the advisors to the king. And they don't even know what's going on. But he's put forth this decree now. All wise men, all conjurers, sorcerers, Chaldeans, put them to the axe. Well, Daniel finds out about this. Now, we know, because of what God has done in Daniel's life, in Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that God brought them out of Judah and managed have them stand up in esteem before the king, God's not going to let anything happen to them. God's going to protect them. Now, I want you to keep that in mind, all right? We're going to come back and talk about that. So what happens here is, verse 14, then Daniel replied with discretion and discernment. Now, there's something you like to see in people.
Amen.
Discretion and discernment. To Arioch, the captain of the king's bodyguard, who had gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. And he answered and said to Arioch, the king's commander, for what reason is the decree from the king so urgent? And then Arioch informed Daniel about the matter. So Daniel now knows the whole situation. Doesn't know the dream, but he knows what the king wants. So Daniel went in and requested of the king that he would give him time in order that he might declare the interpretation to the king. Then, see now, that tells us something too. Daniel was close enough to the king to where he was able to talk to the king and say, just give me a little bit and I'll give you what you want to know. And the king respected him enough to do that. In verse 17, then Daniel went to his house and informed his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, which is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, about the matter, in order that they might request compassion from the God, missed the page here, sorry, from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his friends might not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a night vision, and then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. So in other words, Daniel and his three friends prayed to God and said, God, as you know, we're in trouble down here. We need some help. We need your guidance. We need your wisdom. We need your understanding. We need your knowledge. Please help us to be able to know the dream and to interpret. They put it to God. And God, it says in verse 19, that the mystery was revealed to Daniel. And in verse 20, look what Daniel says. Daniel answered and said, let the name of God be blessed forever and ever, for wisdom and power belongs to him. And it is he who changes the times and the epochs. He removes kings and establishes kings. In other words, folks, think about this. Nebuchadnezzar is not a godly man. He's a pagan, a heathen. But God allowed him to become king of Babylon. Now, we're going to read more about him in this book to find out that God really does a work in the life of Nebuchadnezzar, ultimately. So, think about this. Whenever somebody comes into power, that means God has a plan. Now, I find that very interesting because we have a president right now that is, I think that we could say, is controversial, and at least. And a lot of people, you either really like him or you really hate him. And you know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But what we need to be reminded of is God allows this for special reasons.
Amen.
And we're not supposed to question those things. We're supposed to trust God. And that's exactly what Daniel does. He has respect for this man because he knows God put him on that throne. So then in verse 21 goes on, he says he gives wisdom to wise men and knowledge to men of understanding. It is he who reveals the profound and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells within him. To thee, O God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise, for thou hast given me wisdom and power. Even now thou hast made known to me what we requested of thee, for thou hast made known to us the king's matters. And we're going to stop there and pick it up in 2 weeks. Why 2 weeks? Because next week we're having the Lord's Supper. Okay? So be sure that you're here for the Lord's Supper next week, and then we're going to pick it up the next week. Now I want to talk about Daniel for a minute. out about this, and he realizes right away, it doesn't take a real scholar to figure out, we are in a lot of trouble. Because it included Daniel and his 3 friends, these 4 young men. And they were going to be put to death, along with all the others. And Daniel saw clearly what this meant. And he knew immediately the only one that could save and answer him and show him what to do. And Nebuchadnezzar said it right, or the Chaldeans said it right. There is no one on earth that can reveal the answer to this. Daniel knew that too, but he knew where to go for the answer. He knew that no one on earth knew it, but God knows it. Because God's the one that gave Nebuchadnezzar the dream in the first place. And we need to learn to read these things in God's Word and apply them to our lives. This is a life lesson in this first portion of the 2nd chapter of Daniel. It's a life lesson. Knowing where to go when you're up against the wall. Knowing where you need to go when you don't have the answers you need. Knowing where to go when you don't have the wisdom you need to deal with a matter. I want to tell you, share some scriptures with you from the New Testament. Well, the first one is actually in the Old Testament too. It's from Psalms. Psalms 119:66. Teach me good judgment and knowledge, O God, for I believe in your commandments. In other words, David, the psalmist, he knew too that you had to go to God to learn the things that you need to know for life and for decisions. And David was a king too. He came up as a shepherd boy and became a king. And he knew that he needed God's help to have wisdom and knowledge and understanding and clarity about life. Folks, we all need that. Would you be able to say amen to that? That we all need help from God in making decisions. Amen?
Amen.
I mean, I want to tell you something. I look back on my life and I think, oh, if I'd only prayed about that. You know what I mean? Sometimes we make decisions without thinking, spontaneous decisions, and we live to regret it. Sometimes we live to regret it the rest of our lives. You know what I'm talking about? We need to learn that as believers, as Christians, when we've given our heart to Jesus, we belong to Jesus. Amen?
Amen.
We no longer belong to ourselves. Our thoughts are not our own. Our future, our goals are not our own. Our goals and future belong to the Lord. Whatever we want to do, whatever He wants us to do. I was telling the children in my little missions class, on Friday, after several of them, and I think there were 6, accepted the Lord, and the rest of the kids there, I think already all knew the Lord. I was telling them, I asked them, I said, because we've been talking about missionaries, and what they do, and where they go, and everything. And I said, would you be able to pray a prayer to God, and say, dear God, I trust you. I know you love me. I know you have a plan for my life. And I want to tell you now, I will do whatever you want me to do with my life. Whoa. Did you pray a prayer like that? That's a tough prayer to pray. I remember when I was a little boy and I was learning these things. Because I want to tell you, most of you knew my mom, and when you're around my mom, you're going to learn those things one way or another. You know what I mean? Anyway, I was a little boy, and I was learning the things of God. And I realized that I belonged to God, but I had a problem. I didn't want to do what God wanted me to do. And I used to argue with my Sunday school teacher and say, wait a minute, what if you don't want to do what God wants you to do? My teacher said, then you're in a lot of trouble, Pomona. And that's true. If we've given our heart to Jesus, but we still want to live our life the way we want to live our life and do the things we want to do and go the places we want to go, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And some of us have been in a lot of trouble, including me. But I want to tell you something. It doesn't have to be that way if we learn from Daniel. Daniel knew immediately what to do with this problem. problem. He went to the Master, the Heavenly Father, the God of the galaxies and the universe, who knew all answers. In fact, the one that gave Nebuchadnezzar the dream in the first place. And so he goes, and he gets his friends, and he starts praying. In the book of James, chapter 1, verse 5, it says, if any of you lacks wisdom, does any of us lack wisdom? You think? Let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to him. Have you ever thought about praying for wisdom? God, I'm a little bit dense. I really need some smarts and some wisdom to do the things you want me to do.
Amen.
There is nothing wrong asking God for wisdom and understanding and knowledge. God, take my life. I want to do what you want me to do, but I'm going to need your help because I don't have all the answers. Do you have all the answers? Why, no, we don't. Sometimes, in fact, King Solomon put it best. He says, I don't know how to go in or come out. I'm so stupid. And he was considered the wisest man that ever lived.
Amen.
So if he would say something like that, and I'm way down here somewhere, you understand where that puts me. But you follow what I'm saying here? We need to go to God and ask God for direction, for help, for wisdom, for understanding, to be the person God wants us to be. Now there's another scripture found in Luke chapter 11, verse 9 and 10. You'll love this, and I know you already know this scripture. And this is Jesus speaking. So I say to you, ask, and it will be given to you. What you talking about? What? You mean all I got to do is ask? Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it shall be opened. Jesus said that himself. But you see, we don't always want to ask because we're afraid of the answer. I didn't want to pray when I was a boy about being a pastor or a missionary because I knew what the answer was. I already knew. And I just didn't, la la la, I don't want to hear that. You know what I mean? Sometimes we really don't want to hear what God wants to say to us. We want to go here and say, no, God wants you to go here. But I don't want to go there. You know what I'm talking about? We have problems with obedience. We want to do what we want to do because sometimes we allow our flesh and the world to get a hold of us and just kind of take us wherever it wants to take us. And by the way, Satan has a lot to do with that. And you don't think Satan can affect Christians? Oh, back up and take another look.
Amen.
Now, I don't believe Satan or his demons can possess a Christian. But I do believe that Satan and his demons can influence and oppress a Christian. And we need to be wise. We need to be careful. We need to keep our eyes wide open. We need to learn. Jesus said best. He said we need to be gentle as lambs, but wise as serpents. Daniel had it going on. He had learned at a young age to seek God for every word, every direction, every issue he had in his life. God, Father of the universe, hear my prayer. I have a need. Now, I want to tell you something, folks. Wherever two people get together, one of them's going to be in need. Because that's just our nature. We have needs in our life. We need direction in our life. And I'm not talking about people that are non-Christians. I'm talking about Christians that are trying to live a godly life or do the right thing. We don't always make the right decision, do we? Sometimes we make mistakes simply because we did not look to the Lord. Sometimes we make the wrong decisions because we didn't even want to pray about it because we knew what the answer was going to be. And the challenge in this first half of this chapter is to learn from Daniel, because he knew where to go when he had a decision to make or when he needed information, or when he needed wisdom. And he went to God. Now today, you may be here and you've got something going on in your life. Maybe nobody else even knows anything about it. I mean, come on, face it, folks. We have things going on up here that nobody knows about.
Amen.
Me too. I don't want people knowing everything that's going on there because it embarrasses me. And I've got to deal with it. I'm always praying to God and saying, God, please guard my heart. Lord, please guard my mind. Keep Satan out of there. Because we're human and Satan knows our weaknesses better than anybody else. And so we need to listen to the Lord, and we need to seek him when we have a decision, or we need direction, or we need an answer. And folks, you may be here today with some kind of issue you're facing. We all face issues. Lord, I've got a chance to take this job over here. Should I take that job or should I not? Lord, somebody's offered me to buy this car over here and it's a real good deal. Should I do that or not? Lord, so-and-so's sick and they asked me to pray for him. I don't know. I keep forgetting. You know? All kinds of things that happen within us as we go through our days. Lord, I have a friend that's not saved. Please help me to find some way to be able to talk to them about Jesus. Lord, I've got a friend that's a Christian, but they're not living a Christian life. Please help me to know what to say to them. You know, all the things that we need to pray about, all the things that we need to ask God about, all of the things we need to seek God and knock, and all these things that we need to do to be in the center of God's will. That's where we want to be.
Amen. In
the center of God's will. I belong to Jesus. I've given my heart to the Lord. He's forgiven me of my sins. He's prepared a place for me in heaven. Now I belong to him. Lord, what would you have me do? How would you have me act? Where would you have me go? You get the message. I know you see it. I know you understand it. And I know that everyone in here has gone through some of these things. And so we're going to pray about that this morning. Would you stand with me, please? And I'd like for you to bow your heads, close your eyes for just a moment. And if there's something going on in your life that you're praying about, maybe you're already praying about it and you're seeking the Lord. Maybe it just now is occurring to you to seek the Lord and pray about it. I don't know, but if you've got a need or something that you're dealing with no one looking around, heads bowed, eyes closed, would you raise your hand so I can see your hand? Because I want to pray for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Anybody else? 8, 9. Okay. Heavenly Father, you've seen the hands that are raised this morning. You know that person intimately. Each one of these. And you know others that didn't raise their hand that maybe should have. But Father, you know us, and I pray for these that have raised their hand because they are saying, Lord, yes, I really need some direction in my life, or I need help with a decision, or I need to know what you would have me do, or this or that. And Lord, you know. I don't know, but Lord, I know that you know. And these people that have prayed, that have raised their hand, I pray for them that you will meet their need and reveal to them whatever it is they need to know. Give them the wisdom, give them the knowledge, give them the understanding to make the right decision, to go in the right direction, and to be the person that you've called them to be. If you are here today and you have never given your heart to Jesus, you're not a Christian, you've never asked Jesus into your heart to forgive you of your sins, while everybody's heads are bowed and eyes are closed, would you raise your hand? And only I will see you. Okay, no hands. Let's sing together, shall we? Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. I can feel his mighty power and his grace. I can hear the brush of angels' wings. I see glory on each face. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. One more time together. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. I can feel His mighty power and His grace. I can hear the brush of angels' wings. I see glory on each face. Surely the presence of the Lord is in this place. I'm so glad that you're here today. I pray that God has spoken to your hearts. Mary, I'm going to ask you to lead us in prayer, okay? Let's be dismissed.
Dear Heavenly Father, how we do thank you for our church family and how we appreciate the wonderful singing and preaching that we've heard this morning. Thank you, Lord, for our church and all that it stands for here in the community. Lord, this week, guide and direct us, for we have Jesus' name. Amen.
Mary, thank you. God bless you, everyone. Have a good